Hello, welcome back to the poker vlog. Currently reporting from the familiar Hustler Casino, beautiful parking lot. It's Friday, it's High Stakes Friday on Hustler Casino Live, and that is what I am here for. I think the game today will be 50, 100, probably with a 200 straddle here and there. So should be plenty of action, lots of money on the line. Good luck us. I'll report back with you guys after the session. All right, guys, we are back once again. Today we're playing 5100 with a 100 ante. In this first hand, the 200 is on. Mike X opens in late position to 600, and I look down at ace 9 in the small blind. The unsuited variety, I'm going to go ahead and say that probably like 95% of the time should just fold this, even against a late position raise. But this time, I decided to get frisky with it and raise it up to $2,800. We do have an ace, and Mike X does raise with a variety of hands, so it can't be too bad. Anyways, the blinds both fold, gets back to Mike, and he makes the call. So we're going to go heads up out of position to a bad flop. It's 6-5-4 with 2 hearts. So we've got just about the worst hand we could have on this board. I check it over to him, and now Mike X checks it back. Turn card's not great. It's the 7 of hearts, bad to worse. I check it again, and now Mike X puts in a bet of 2,200, around a third the size of the pot. I know what you guys are thinking. We've got nothing, so a fold seems pretty standard, but an 8 would give us a higher straight than the board would have on it. And also Mike X could be stabbing at this pot since I've checked twice with a hand that we are beating, like let's say Jack 10 suited or Queen Jack suited, maybe like Ace Deuce suited. You know, it's questionable how often that's happening, but I think often enough that against such a small size we can call once. So that's what I do. And we go to an interesting river. It's the King of Clubs. Should generally be a little bit better for me, assuming he doesn't have like a really strong hand. So when I check it over for a third time, I'm a bit surprised to see Mike X assemble another bet. I did also think on the turn he could be betting with like a weak hand that might need some protection, like let's say any single pair holding or even a better ace high than me. So I really expected this river to go check more often than not. Instead, he puts in $6,800, a pretty big bet compared to the pot sized, and that's really spiking my curiosity. Again, I should say right away that this is a very straightforward fold, but sometimes curiosity gets the better of me, and especially so when it's against players that I like to give as much action as possible to, such as Mike X, good buddy of mine, someone who does not shy away from the action himself, so I don't want to be playing too conservatively against him. In the end, I thought this bet represented either a total bluff like Queen High or Jack High, or something pretty damn strong like a straight or a flush. It's pretty hard to make straights and flushes, so I decided to light some money on fire and make the call here. Who knows, maybe we're right sometimes, but not this time. I essentially donate money to Mike X here, but then again, it would have been pretty cool, and I would have looked like a genius if we had the best hand. Not the case this time, and we start off the session with an embarrassing hand history. In the next one, we are once more going against Mike X, and this one action gets around to him in the small blind. He raises it up, and I look down at Queen 9 suited in the straddle. We've got position, and this hand I think plays a bit better as a re-raise than just a call, so that's what I do. He comes along, so we go heads up to a flop, which is a pretty damn good one for my hand. It's 8-7-5 with 2 clubs. That means I've got a flush draw, 2 overcards, and a straight draw. So when he checks, I'm going to continue betting. I put in $2,800. Mike X makes the call, and we go to a turn, which is the Jack of Spades. Interesting card here. We could have 10-9, could still have some sets, and even 2 pairs once in a while. So when he checks, with all the stuff we got going on, the additional straight draw outs now, we could hit a 6 or a 10 to make a straight. I think another bet is for sure in order, so I put in $8,400. Interestingly enough, however, Mike X now check raises to 21.7K. Very unexpected, especially when I bet such a large sizing, but yeah, nice play from him, I suppose, if he could see my exact hand, because I've got no choice but to call with all those aforementioned outs. So that's what I do. Looking for some help on the river, of course. and it's not really what we get. The 9 of diamonds, not exactly what I was hoping for, because all the hands he's representing with his check raise on the turn are still beating us, like straights, 2 pairs, sets, etc. So when Mike X now announces all in for $21,000, I don't give it much thought and just fold right away. Not really interested in calling with just a pair of 9s, but turns out that was the best hand, as Mike X had ace 4 of clubs for a straight draw and flush draw himself. Now, the reason I didn't give it any thought mainly is because I have removal to a lot of the bluffs that I'd want him to have. So I figured queen 9 of clubs is probably one of the worst hands to call with, but always frustrating to go see the results later on. All I had to do was say call and we would have won a big pot, but instead Mike X outplays me once again. Yeah, not the best night so far. Let's see if we can turn things around. And what better hand to do that with than pocket kings? In this one, Nick Airball opens up the action from early position to $300. Gets to me in late position, I make it 1,000, and now Henry makes it 4,000 from the small blind. Pretty strong line considering that Nick raised from early position, but I still went ahead and re-raised. However, Henry is someone who can be a little aggressive pre-flop. So when it gets back to me, I think for the most part, call makes some sense, but also another raise wouldn't be too bad. This time I do decide to put in another raise. 11,500 to go, and now it's back on Henry, who after some time does what I was not really hoping to see and announces all in for $62,000. Now, like I said, all the action pre-flop gives me the feeling that Henry's got a monster. I don't think he would do this with queens. I think mainly he would do this with pocket aces, of course, pocket kings, and ace king. Well, ace king and pocket kings don't seem super likely since I have 2 kings, so I think the very obvious answer is that we're going to be running into pocket aces fairly often in this situation. Now, of course, as you guys can see on the screen, I am dead wrong, as Henry is actually going ballistic with ace-queen offsuit here, taking a stand for once and for all, but in the moment, I didn't really know that, so not in love with this situation, but after giving it some thought, perhaps a little bit too much thought, I do eventually make the call. We decide to run it twice, and despite having the best hand pre-flop here, we don't win. Henry makes a flush on the first one with 4 spades out there, and we hold on the second board. So biggest pot of the night so far. We run a little bad and chop it up. For sure would have been nice to win this one considering how rough the session has been so far, but that's life. More hands to come. In the next interesting hand of the night, well, we're 0 for 3, so we're definitely due for a win. And that's what I'm thinking when I look down at 7-5 of clubs. Sashimi makes it 300. Alec re-raises to 1,000. And look, Mr. Torelli, I've got respect for your game, but not that much. I'm going to raise it up myself. $2,500 to go. Gets back around to Alec, and he makes the call. So we're going to go heads up in position with 7 high. How bad can it really be, right? We go to a flop of King, Jack, Deuce with 1 club and 2 spades. There are 2 picture cards out there, and I re-raised pre-flop, so I think that's enough of an excuse to continue applying pressure. Alec checks, and I bet 1,500. He makes the call with his 6 high flush draw. Little did I know we actually had the best hand. Turn is the 5 of hearts, giving me a pair. Alec checks, and now I decide to continue betting, hoping to put him in a tough spot with any pocket pair or a hand like ace-jack suited, jack-10 suited. All these weak holdings that are going to be in a lot of pressure versus a second bet. Of course, if he's got a king, I don't really expect him to go anywhere just yet, but even if that's the case, we could bluff some rivers. So I put in $5,000, and Alec thinks for a bit before calling. Not what I wanted to see, but probably going to bluff if the board pairs or if a spade comes. Obviously, a 5 or a 7 would be cool too, but that's not what we get. Instead, it's the deuce of spades. Alec checks again, and now it's back on me. Honestly, I'm not in love with this hand, mainly because we're playing a little bit too wide. This is a little bit too much of a punt for all the pre-flop shenanigans with a hand as weak as 7-5 suited. But here we are in this spot, time to still try and make the best decision. Of course, I did not know Alec had a flush. I mainly ruled that out because I didn't expect him to check call out of position with a flush draw. Typically, that's not something that I would expect Alec to do, but this time he does have a flush, and it's going to work out perfectly for him because I am going to go for a bluff. Pot size bet of $20,000, hoping to get a king to fold, but he's got a flush and he's not going to fold that. So just like that, we are 0 for 4 on the night, stuck nearly $100,000, playing terribly, running quite bad. Yeah, we've got our work cut out for us. You know, at the same time, I can't complain too much though, because I'm kind of doing it to myself. You know what I mean? And here's another perfect example. In this one, Dylan raises to 500. Straddle is on. 3 people make the call of his 500, and it's back to me in the big blind with Queen 3 suited. There's another name for this hand, but I'm not going to say it here on the vlog. And I don't know. I just sensed a little bit of weakness from Dylan and everyone else just calling his $500 raise. I mean, how strong can they really be, right? So despite the fact my hand is a terrible hand to do this play with, I raise it up to $3,000, the old squeeze play. And it seems like it's going to work because Dylan gets out of the way. Sashimi folds. Pepe folds. He gets back around to Mike, and turns out he's a little bit confident against me. Who can really blame him, given how the night's been going? He makes the call once again. He's got the button. He's got a better hand. He's got a nice haircut. What could go wrong? We go to a flop of 7-4-3 with no diamond out there. We do have bottom pair, so, you know, it's not the worst thing ever, but I don't really see how much value we can get from betting this kind of board. It's going to hit him more often than me, considering the pre-flop action. So I check it. Mike X does not check it. Instead, he bets $2,200. I'm not just going to re-raise pre-flop with Queen 3 and fold a pair on the flop. So I make the call, and we see a bad turn card. It's the 5 of spades. So now any 6 makes a straight, and of course, if he was randomly betting with a hand that contained a 5, he now makes a pair better than mine. So I check it again. Probably going to give up on this one, but Mike X checks it back. So we go to a river, which is thematic, to say the least. It's the 6 of diamonds, putting a straight on the board. Now we're chopping this one up, and it's really just a question of who's got an 8 more often than the other guy. And I think you guys probably know the answer. Mike X called twice pre-flop. He's going to have all sorts of hands that contain an 8, whereas, you know, I re-raised pre-flop, so I'm not going to have one too often. For that reason, I check it over to him, hoping he doesn't put in a big bet, but instead he instantly checks it back, and we chop this one up. Seems fair, I guess. You know, he had the best hand pre-flop, and I had the best hand on the flop and turn, so in the end, it's a fair outcome. But I wouldn't have been upset if I won this one. Not gonna lie. So as you guys can tell, it has not been my best night by any means, but we've got the perfect remedy, pocket aces. In this one, Nick Airball makes it 300. Pepe calls, Alec calls, and of course, if I'm going to re-raise with Queen 3, I should probably do it with 2 of the letter A as well. So that's what I do, make it 2,000 to go in position. Back around to Nick Airball, who does what I was hoping he would do the least, and just calls. So that gives a price for Pepe to come along and Alec to come along. Recipe for disaster when you've got aces is playing multi-way, but we go to a pretty healthy flop. It's Queen, Queen 4 with 2 hearts out there. Checks all the way around to me, and I think checking back is totally reasonable, but betting small also has merit. This time I do bet $2,000, and now Nick Airball check raises to 9,000. Well, if it's time to die, it's time to die. But this guy bluffs a little bit too often for me to just fold aces. If he's got a queen, he's got to show me the money. So I make the call in position, and we see an interesting turn card. It's the 4 of spades, which I definitely like because he was also representing a hand like pocket 4s on the flop, and now that feels a little bit less likely. Not too surprised to see Nick Airball check on this card after getting called on the flop. Now it's on me, and again, I think checking back or betting small both make some sense, but for a few nerdy reasons that I'm not going to get too deep into, I think the small bet makes more sense. So I put in around a third the size of the pot, 8,500. Nick Airball, now that the board is double paired, gets rid of his flush draw, and we take this one down. So not the biggest pot in the world, but definitely feels good to profit money in a poker hand for once tonight. All right, now it's time for us to play a couple of fun hands against the legendary Pepe. In this one, the straddle is on. He raises up the action of 500, and I look down at Jack 10 offsuit on the button. Terrible hand, should just fold it, but similar to Mike X, Pepe is someone that I like to battle with when I can. And Jack 10 offsuit can flop straights and quads and full houses. So I make it 2,000, Pepe makes the call, and we go heads up to a flop of Queen 6-5 all clubs. Yeah, Jack 10's not a great hand, but, you know, we're also due to flop a little bit better than this once in a while. However, Pepe's going to miss this board just as often as I am, I think. Probably not, but that's what I'm telling myself as I put in a small continuation bet of 1,600. Pepe makes the call with top pair, top kicker, and we see the king of spades on the turn. Now Pepe checks, and this is a great card for me to continue betting, but I think occasionally checking back and going for a bluff on the river also makes sense, mainly because I would occasionally also check back a king or a hand like ace queen, for example, that might go for some river value. So both options seem okay. I think betting is probably better, but I decide to check it back, and we see the 9 of diamonds on the river suddenly giving me the nut straight. Of course, we still lose to a flush, but how often are we going to see that from Pepe? I don't think too often, and especially this time when he checks it again. Now I do go for some value. I put in a pot-sized bet, hoping he has a king or, ace queen and makes the call, but Pepe is too good for that. He instead thinks for a bit and folds. And of course, guesses my hand right away. Jack 10, I tell him, yep, and he's quite happy with himself. Well, all right, Pepe, you want to guess my hand? Try to guess this one. Nick Airball makes it 300. Pepe makes it 2,000, and I look down at 10-9 offsuit in late position. If Jack 10 offsuit worked out, why can't 9-10 offsuit also work out? So I put in a 4-bet to $6,000 in position. I think this is going to look pretty damn strong, if nothing else, but that's about the only good thing I could say about this play. Do not try this at home. Do not try this anywhere, really. Just a terrible losing play long term, but maybe this time we can figure out a way to win. Pepe makes the call, which, considering this pre-flop action, I think is going to consist of some pretty strong hands. So we're going to look for some good boards to try to steal this one. 8 3-deuce rainbow doesn't seem too bad. If he's got ace king or ace queen, we could probably win with some pressure. So when he checks, I start with a bet right around a third the size of the pot. Same size I would take if I had aces, kings, or any of the good stuff. Pepe doesn't seem convinced, though, as he makes the call. That's not what I wanted to see. Most likely he's got a pocket pair that is not going anywhere just yet. Looking for some good turn cards to bluff, and that's what we get. It's the queen of diamonds. Not quite as good as a king, but it's still pretty damn good. We could represent all sorts of strong hands still on this board. Now some bluffs also improve, like ace queen, and of course we've got a straight draw to go along with it now. So with all that in mind, I decide to continue betting, much like I would, as mentioned, if I had a value hand. I put in $18,000, and now Pepe is not loving the situation with his pocket jacks, and I don't really blame him. If I had his hand in this situation, I would be miserable. After a few moments, Pepe does eventually decide to fold his pocket pair, and we take this one down. So the 10-9 offsuit adventure works out this time, but let's be honest, most of the time it's just going to be a miserable, disastrous outcome for me. Not this time though, so hope you guys enjoyed that hand. And on that note, we move to the last one of the night. This one we are going to be going up against Dr. P. So at this point in the session, Dr. P has had a rough night, and I kind of had the feeling that when he picked up a good hand, he was going to go with it. So that's the explanation for why this hand played out the way it did. So in this one, Sashimi raises to 500 with the 200 straddle being on. Mike X calls, and I look down at pocket tens on the button. Almost always, I think a re-raise is in order here, but this time I just call. Not that I necessarily think pocket tens just calling on the button is that bad, but probably better to re-raise. In this case, though, like I said, Dr. P, I had a vibe that he was going to do something. And sure enough, he does do something. He raises it all the way up to $6,000, a huge re-raise. Sashimi gets out of the way, Mike X gets out of the way, and I don't know, man. I don't think he would really go this large if he had a hand that he loved, like a big pocket pair. So when it gets back to me, instead of just calling or folding, I say, let's go with it. I feel like I've got the best hand more often than not. I announce all in, and Dr. P makes the call. So maybe we're in some trouble, but it turns out we are not, as he's got himself ace king. He asked to run it twice. As per usual, I don't care. I'm happy to do whatever the other guy wants. So 2 boards, it is ace king versus pocket tens, a good old-fashioned race, aka flip. Well, we've been running pretty bad most of the night. Despite playing bad cards, we've also not hit a whole lot of flops or, had the winning hand very often. So I think we're due, right? Nope. Ace on the first board. And what do you know? Looks like we're going to chop this one up until a king hits on the second board. That means we're going to lose both of these boards, and Dr. P is going to get a nice, clean double up, plus some extra juice from other players pre-flop. Good hand for him, bad hand for me. and that just kind of sums up my night. However, stay tuned for probably the biggest pot of my entire night, which happened right after the stream ended. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the hands. All right, so the stream just finished. I am the last one here left with this guy, Mike X, who apparently bluffed me in that huge pot where I had queen nine of clubs. I rivered a 9 and thought it was no good. It turns out that was the best hand, so this guy. Interesting day today, but before I move on, I have to go over one last hand that just happened as the stream ended between myself and Alec Torelli. So in this hand, you have video of it. Mike's got video of it. We're gonna put it here somewhere. In this hand, Alec opens in late position to 500. I make it 2,000 on the button with pocket twos. Questionable play, but let's just move on. Someone cold calls in the blind. I think it was Dylan. Dylan cold calls, and then Alec also calls. So we go 3 ways to a flop of queen 5-3 rainbow. Granted, it is a questionable hand, like I said, pre-flop, but of course we don't flop a set. That's kind of how the day's been going. So when it checks to me, I just check it back. Not too interested in bluffing, considering that no one's gonna believe anything I'm selling at this point. So I check it back, and what do you know? We hit a 2 on the turn out of nowhere. We have the most disguised set you'll ever see. And even better news is that even though Dylan checks, Alec does not. He now puts in a bet of $4,800. Now it's on me, and I think you could go either way between raising or just calling. I think I like calling a little bit better since it'd be pretty tough to have bluffs in this situation. So I just call, and then Dylan folds. So we're going heads up to a river, which is chef's kiss. It's another queen, giving me a full house and most likely giving Alec trips based on how the hand played. Sure, sometimes we'll be getting coolered against pocket 5s and pocket 3s, but for the most part, I'm gonna have the best hand. He doesn't slow down either. He puts in $13,000. He's got like 50K behind, maybe 40, and I cover him. So I just go all in, hoping to get the max from trips or maybe even like a straight. Ace 4, for example. Alec does not snap call, so it seems we do have the best hand, but after a few minutes of thought, he does actually call. And we end up winning versus 6-4 of spades, which is somewhat ironic considering I lost a big pot to him when he had that hand earlier today. But this time it goes our way and we win the biggest pot of the day by far. Sadly, still ended up losing a little bit. As always, results are right there, but this definitely helped the dent. So yeah, I'm exhausted, really bad headache, and I think I'm gonna call it a night. As always, thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned. I'm gonna be traveling soon to a few different spots for poker, so some different vlogs coming up. And yeah, as always, thank you guys for the support. Until next time, good luck at your local tables. Peace.